They say that success is the best revenge, but I never wanted revenge. I just wanted a mother who looked at me the way she looked at my sister, and a father who saw me as an investment rather than an expense. I didn't know that standing on a podium in front of 5,000 people would be the moment that finally severed the cord. I didn't know that the silence of a stunned crowd could be louder than any scream. Before I take you to that blistering June morning in the football stadium, I need to take you back 4 years to a conversation that happened over a plate of cold meatloaf in a kitchen that smelled of lemon polish and betrayal. It was a Tuesday evening in late August. The humidity in Ohio was stifling, the kind that sticks your shirt to your back. I was 18 years old, buzzing with the nervous energy of a teenager about to leave the nest. I had been accepted into the state university's honors program. It wasn't the Ivy League, but it was respectable, and more importantly, it was affordable, or so I thought, considering the nest egg Grandma Edith had left specifically for my education. $50,000. In my mind, that money was a shield, a guarantee that I wouldn't have to drown in debt like so many of my peers. Evelyn, pass the salt, would you? My mother Bernice said, her voice carrying that airy, distracted tone she always used when she was planning something she knew I wouldn't like. I slid the shaker across the oak table. My father Lloyd was meticulously cutting his meatloaf into perfect 1-inch squares. He didn't look up. That should have been my first warning. Lloyd never avoided eye contact unless he was guilty. So, I started trying to keep the mood light. I need to go to the bank with you tomorrow, Dad. The tuition deposit is due by Friday, and I want to get my books early. The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to choke on. My sister Charlene, who was 22 and currently planning a wedding that cost more than most people's annual salaries, took a sip of her iced tea. She smirked. It was a small, fleeting expression, but I caught it. Charlene had always been the golden child, the fragile porcelain doll that needed wrapping in cotton wool, while I was regarded as the sturdy, low-maintenance appliance that you could kick and it would still work. About that, Lloyd finally said, setting his knife down. He cleared his throat. Your mother and I have been reviewing the family finances. Okay, I said, my stomach tightening. We've made an executive decision, Bernice chimed in, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Charlene's wedding expenses have ballooned. The venue in the Hamptons requires a larger down payment, and frankly, she and Chad need a solid start. A house down payment is crucial in this economy. I stared at them. What does that have to do with my tuition? Well, Lloyd said, finally looking at me, his eyes hard and pragmatic. We've decided to reallocate the funds Grandma Edith left. We're transferring the $50,000 to Charlene. I laughed. It was a reflexive, incredulous sound. Good one, Dad. Seriously, what time are we going to the bank? Evelyn, we're not joking, Bernice said, her voice sharpening. We gave it a lot of thought. You're capable. You've always been the scrappy one. You're smart, Evelyn. You can figure things out. Charlene isn't like you. She needs the help. She needs the stability. Grandma Edith left that money for my college, I whispered, the blood draining from my face. It was in her will, she told me. It was left to the estate technically, Lloyd corrected me, his tone that of a businessman closing a deal. And as the executor, I have the discretion to use it where it's most needed. Right now, your sister's future is the priority. You can take out loans. You can work. It builds character. Character. I stood up, my chair scraping violently against the floor. You're stealing my future to pay for a party. Sit down, Evelyn, Bernice snapped. Stop being so dramatic. This is why we didn't tell you until now. You always make everything about yourself. This is for the family. I sat back down, not because I wanted to, but because my legs suddenly felt like they couldn't hold my weight. The betrayal wasn't just about the money, it was the casual cruelty of their logic. They had sat in this very kitchen drinking coffee, balancing the checkbook, and decided that my education was less valuable than Charlene's centerpieces and a down payment on a colonial revival she didn't earn. You're being selfish, Charlene said softly, playing the victim as she always did. She reached out to touch Lloyd's arm. Daddy, tell her not to ruin this for me. I'm so stressed already with the guest list. Evelyn, look at me, Lloyd commanded. I looked at him. I saw a man I had spent 18 years trying to impress with straight A's, with varsity soccer trophies, with perfect attendance. I realized in that moment that none of it mattered. Your sister needs this. You are strong. You are a survivor. We are doing you a favor, really. Kids who have everything handed to them get soft. You'll thank us later when you learn the value of $1. A favor, I repeated, my voice trembling. You're throwing me into a shark tank with no life vest and calling it a swimming lesson. There are student loans, Bernice said dismissively, waving a hand in the air. Everyone has them, and you can get a job. The campus has plenty of opportunities, work study or waitressing. My goodness, Evelyn, don't look at us like we're monsters. We're providing you with a roof over your head until you leave on Saturday. Be grateful. The gaslighting was masterful. Within 10 minutes, they had twisted the narrative so thoroughly that my valid anger was painted as ingratitude, and their theft was painted as parental wisdom. I looked at Charlene. She was beaming now, discussing floral arrangements with Bernice, as if they hadn't just detonated my life. I won't come home for Thanksgiving, I said quietly. Oh, stop it. Bernice sighed. Don't be petty. You'll get over it once you're settled. You always do. I went to my room and packed my bags that night. I didn't wait for Saturday. I took the few $100s I had saved from babysitting, packed my clothes into trash bags because Charlene had borrowed my suitcases for a weekend getaway and never returned them, and I left. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic out of the driveway at 3 a.m. I didn't leave a note. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard stone form in the center of my chest. It was the weight of a realization I was an orphan with living parents. The next few days were a blur of panic and bureaucracy. I arrived at the university campus 3 days early, sleeping in my car until the dorms opened. I spent hours in the financial aid office begging for guidance. The financial aid officer, a weary woman named Mrs. Agnes, looked at my file with pity. Without parental contribution, you're looking at significant loans, Evelyn, Mrs. Agnes said, peering over her spectacles. And you'll need to cover living expenses on your own. It's going to be very tight. I'll work, I said, my jaw set. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't let me get kicked out. I signed papers that mortgaged my future before it even began. I looked at the staggering numbers, interest rates, principal amounts, and I felt a wave of nausea. But beneath the nausea was a burning, white-hot anger. I would not let them win. I would not let Bernice and Lloyd be right about me needing them. And I certainly wouldn't let Charlene's wedding be the reason I failed. The freshman year that followed was not the movie montage of parties and frisbee on the quad that my peers experienced. For me, it was a blur of gray exhaustion. I took 18 credit hours because I wanted to graduate early to save money. I worked 3 jobs. From 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. I stocked shelves at the campus bookstore. From 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I was in classes. From 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. I waited tables at a greasy diner called the Rusty Spoon on the edge of town. And from 10 o'clock p.m. until my eyes gave out, I studied. I lived on ramen, noodles, peanut butter, and the occasional mistake order from the diner kitchen. I lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. My shoes developed holes in the soles, and when it rained, I wrapped my feet in plastic grocery bags inside my sneakers to keep my socks dry. Social media was a form of self-torture I couldn't stop inflicting on myself. I saw photos of Charlene's wedding in October. It was lavish. The flowers alone probably cost more than my entire year of tuition. There was Bernice wearing a gown of shimmering silver, looking like the mother of the year. There was Lloyd beaming as he walked Charlene down the aisle. And there was Charlene looking triumphant. They hadn't even realized I wasn't there until a week later when Bernice texted me. You missed a lovely ceremony. Hope you're studying hard. I didn't reply. By the middle of my sophomore year, I was running on fumes. The physical toll was undeniable. I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of cheap concealer could hide. I fell asleep in lectures. My grades were good. I maintained a 3.8 GPA, but I was fighting for every decimal point. One afternoon in November, disaster struck. My car broke down. The transmission. The mechanic told me it would cost $1,200 to fix. I had $42 in my bank account. Without the car, I couldn't get to the diner. Without the diner, I couldn't pay my rent for the off-campus room I was sharing with 3 other girls. I walked 3 miles in the freezing rain to the administration building. I was going to withdraw. I had done the math, and the math said I was finished. I couldn't afford the next semester's tuition gap that the loans didn't cover. I sat on a bench outside the dean's office, dripping wet, shivering, clutching a withdrawal form. I looked at the paper, and a single tear leaked out. Just one. I was too dehydrated to cry properly. "You're dripping on my parquet floor," a voice said. I looked up. Standing there was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite and elegance. She wore a tailored navy suit, pearls, and had silver hair cut in a sharp bob. It was Dean Virginia Sterling. She was legendary on campus, terrifying, brilliant, and absolutely intolerant of nonsense. "I'm sorry," I stammered, trying to stand up but stumbling because my legs were numb. I'm leaving." "Leaving the building or the university?" she asked, her eyes narrowing behind rimless glasses. "The university," I whispered. I can't do it anymore." Dean Sterling looked at me. She didn't look at the form. She looked at my shoes, the wet canvas sneakers with the plastic bags peeking out. She looked at my frayed coat. She looked at the textbooks clutched to my chest, which I refused to put down, even though they were heavy. "Come with me," she commanded. It wasn't an offer, it was an order. I followed her into an office that smelled of old leather and expensive coffee. She pointed to a chair. "Sit. Agnes, bring us 2 coffees, black, and bring some of those bagels from the faculty lounge." I sat terrified. Was I in trouble? Dean Sterling sat behind her massive mahogany desk and pulled up a file on her computer. "Evelyn, 3.9 GPA in economics, top of the class in advanced statistics. Professor Dolores tells me you wrote a paper on market volatility that she's thinking of submitting to a journal." I blinked. "She is. Why are you quitting, Evelyn?" "I don't have the money," I said bluntly. I was too tired for pride. "My parents, they had other priorities. I've been working 3 jobs, but my car died and I can't get to work and I can't pay the tuition gap for spring. I'm done." Dean Sterling leaned back, tenting her fingers. "I see. So you're not quitting because you're not smart enough. You're quitting because you're broke." "Yes, ma'am." "My father was a coal miner," Dean Sterling said, her voice dropping an octave, losing some of its crisp administrative edge. "He died when I was 12. I scrubbed floors to pay for my undergraduate degree. I know what a hungry student looks like, Evelyn. And I know the look of someone who is carrying the weight of a family that failed them." I looked down at my hands. "I tried." "Trying isn't enough," she said sharply. "Strategy is what matters." She typed something rapidly on her keyboard. "We have an endowment, the Sterling Merit Fund. It's discretionary. Usually I use it to bring in guest speakers or fix the HVAC, but I have the authority to allocate it to emergency student retention." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, looking me dead in the eye, "that if you can maintain a 4.0 GPA for the next 2 years, I will cover your tuition gap. I will also get you a job on campus as a research assistant for Professor Dolores. It pays better than a diner and it's walking distance. No car needed." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "This isn't charity," she warned, pointing a manicured finger at me. "I am investing in you, just like I would invest in a stock. I expect a return. I expect you to be brilliant. I expect you to make me look like a genius for betting on you. Do we have a deal?" "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, Dean Sterling." "Good. Now eat that bagel." she said, gesturing to the plate Agnes had set down. You look like you're about to faint, and I don't have time for paperwork if you hit your head. That afternoon, I didn't just get a scholarship, I got a lifeline, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of an expectation that was actually rooted in belief, not exploitation. The next 2 years were a transformation. I quit the diner, I moved into a cheaper, closer dorm room. I practically lived in the economics department. Professor Dolores, a stern woman with a messy bun and a mind like a steel trap, took me under her wing. She pushed me harder than I thought possible, but she also made sure there was always extra food at our meetings. Evelyn, this data analysis is sloppy, she would say, tossing a report back at me. And then in the same breath, I made too much lasagna last night. Take this Tupperware home, I don't want it cluttering my fridge. I began to understand what a functional support system looked like. It wasn't about hugs and empty praise. It was about people who saw your potential and refused to let you waste it. Dean Sterling would check on me once a month. Our meetings were brief. Grades still up? Good. How are the shoes? Good. Get back to work. But I saw the pride in her eyes. Meanwhile, my biological family was a distant radio station playing static. Bernice and Lloyd called maybe once every 3 months. The calls were always the same. Charlene is pregnant, Bernice announced during my junior year. We're so excited. You should send a gift. I'm a student mom. I have no money, I'd reply. Always the victim. Bernice would sigh. Well, at least try to come to the baby shower. I can't. Finals. You always choose books over family, Lloyd would grumble in the background. I never told them about the Sterling Merit Fund. I never told them I was publishing papers. I never told them I had secured a prestigious internship at a top financial firm in Chicago for the summer. I let them believe I was scraping by, barely passing, living a miserable little life. It was safer that way. If they knew I had success, they would try to consume it. By the spring of my senior year, I had applied to PhD programs. With Dean Sterling's recommendation and my portfolio, I was accepted into 3 Ivy League schools with full funding. I sat in Dean Sterling's office when the acceptance letters came. Stanford, Harvard, Wharton. She read them out, a rare smile cracking her stoic expression. Well, Evelyn, it seems my investment has matured. I couldn't have done it without you, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. Nonsense, you did the work. I just removed the obstacles. She paused, looking at me thoughtfully. Who is coming to your graduation? My parents, I think, I said. And Charlene. Do they know? She asked. Know what? That you are the valedictorian. I shook my head. No, the list hasn't been published publicly yet, and I haven't told them. Dean Sterling's smile turned into something sharper, something almost predatory. Good. Keep it that way. Surprise is a powerful tactical advantage. 3 weeks before graduation, the phone rang. It was Bernice. Evelyn, we need to talk about logistics for your little ceremony, she said. She made it sound like I was graduating from a weekend pottery class. It's a university commencement, Mom. It's not small. Right, well, we're going to be in the area anyway, she said breezily. Charlene needs a break from the baby and Lloyd wants to visit a golf course near Columbus. So we figured we'd swing by, but we can't stay long. We have a reservation at a steakhouse at 1 p.m., so we need to leave the ceremony by 12:30 at the latest. The ceremony doesn't end until 1 p.m. Well, you can't expect us to sit in the sun for 3 hours just to watch you walk across a stage for 10 seconds. We'll see you beforehand. Oh, and Evelyn. Yes. We need to talk about your plans after graduation. Charlene and Chad are having some liquidity issues. The house needed a new roof, and Chad's boat investment didn't pan out. Since you've been working and saving, we assume you've been saving since you didn't have any expenses. We thought you could loan your sister a few thousand, just to tide them over. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. The audacity was breathtaking. They stripped me of my inheritance to buy that house, and now they wanted me to subsidize the repairs. We can talk about it when you get here, I said, my voice eerily calm. Good. We knew you'd be reasonable. You've always been the independent one. You don't have expenses like a family does. I hung up. I stared at the wall of my dorm room. I looked at the magna cum laude sash hanging on my door. I looked at the acceptance letter from Harvard. Reasonable, I whispered to the empty room. Oh, I'll be reasonable. I went to the closet and pulled out the dress I had bought for graduation. It wasn't cheap. It was a structured white sheath dress that made me look like a CEO. I had spent my entire signing bonus from my summer internship on it. I wasn't the girl in the plastic bag sneakers anymore. Graduation morning was scorching. The Ohio sun beat down on the football stadium, turning the turf into a frying pan. Thousands of students in black robes filled the field. The stands were a sea of families fanning themselves with programs. I spotted them easily. Bernice was wearing a hat that was too big, obstructing the view of the people behind her. Charlene was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, looking bored. Lloyd was checking his watch. I walked over to the fence near the seating area before the procession began. There you are, Bernice said, looking me up and down. Oh, Evelyn, why did you buy that expensive dress? You're just going to cover it with a robe. You really need to learn to be more frugal if you want to help your sister. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Charlene, I said. God, it's hot. Charlene complained, barely looking at me. How long is this going to take? My feet are swelling. It's a standard ceremony, I said. Look, Lloyd said, wiping sweat from his forehead. We're sitting in Section C. When you walk, just wave. Okay. We might head out a bit early to beat the traffic to the restaurant. We'll text you where to meet us. You might want to stay until the end, I said. Why? Bernice asked, distracted by a smudge on her sunglasses. Just, you might find it interesting. Doubt it, Charlene snorted. It's just a bunch of nerds getting diplomas. Did you manage to get a B average, Evie? I know working at a diner must have been hard on your study time. Something like that, I said. Go join your line. Lloyd shooed me away. And try to fix your hair. It looks windblown. I walked away. I didn't fix my hair. I walked straight to the front of the line to the seat marked number 1, the seat reserved for the valedictorian. The procession began. The music swelled pomp and circumstance. I walked in head high. I didn't look at Section C. I looked at the stage. Sitting there in full academic regalia was Dean Sterling. She caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The ceremony dragged on. Speeches about the future, about changing the world. I knew my parents were checking their watches. I knew they were calculating the driving time to the steakhouse. Finally, it was time for the awards. Dean Sterling stepped to the podium. The stadium quieted. Her voice boomed across the speakers, commanding absolute attention. Ladies and gentlemen, parents and graduates, she began. Every year we select a valedictorian. Usually this is the student with the highest GPA. But this year the decision was unanimous, not just because of the numbers, but because of the story. I sat frozen. This wasn't the standard script. The student standing before you today achieved a perfect 4.0 GPA in economics and statistics, Dean Sterling continued. She has published 2 papers in academic journals as an undergraduate. She has been accepted to Harvard's PhD program on a full fellowship. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I glanced at the big screen. The camera was panning over the students looking for the mystery scholar. But the numbers don't tell the whole story, Sterling said, her voice sharpening. This student began her journey with us 4 years ago under difficult circumstances. She was stripped of her college fund by her own family days before she arrived. The stadium went silent. Dead silent. She worked 3 jobs. She walked to class in the rain because she couldn't afford car repairs. She went hungry so she could buy textbooks. She did this without a single dollar of support from the people who were supposed to nurture her. I felt the tears prickling my eyes. She was telling them. She was telling everyone. She is the embodiment of resilience. She is the embodiment of excellence. And she is the daughter that this university is proud to claim as its own, even if others did not know her worth. Dean Sterling paused for effect. It is my distinct honor to introduce the class of 2024 valedictorian, Evelyn Rose Miller. The stadium erupted. The applause was like a physical wave. I stood up. The camera on the Jumbotron zoomed in on my face, then cut to the VIP section where the families of the award winners usually sat. But my family wasn't in the VIP section. I walked up the stairs to the stage. As I shook Dean Sterling's hand, she leaned in. "Look at Section C, Evelyn." I looked. The giant screen behind me was now showing the crowd. The camera operator, sensing the drama, had found my family. Maybe it was because they were the only ones not clapping. Bernice's mouth was hanging open, her jaw practically on her chest. Lloyd looked like he had been struck by lightning. His face was a mask of pale shock. Charlene looked furious, her eyes darting around as if wondering why everyone was cheering for the sister she looked down on. They looked small. They looked pathetic. And for the first time, they looked at me with fear. I stepped to the microphone. I waited for the applause to die down. I smoothed my gown. I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Dean Sterling," I said, my voice ringing out clear and steady. "And thank you to the faculty who became my family when I didn't have one." I saw Bernice flinch on the big screen. 4 years ago, I continued abandoning the prepared speech about chasing dreams I had written the night before. I decided to speak the truth. I was told that I was the strong one. I was told that I didn't need help, that struggling would build character. I was told that my education was less important than a party. A gasp went through the crowd. I stand here today to tell you that struggle does not build character. Struggle builds survival mechanisms. Support builds character. Love builds character. I survived because of the strangers in this university who saw value in me. I survived because of a dean who gave me a chance and a professor who fed me lasagna. I looked directly at the camera. I knew they were watching. To all the students here who felt invisible, who worked the night shifts, who ate instant noodles while watching others live off their parents' credit cards, this is for you. We are not defined by the people who failed to invest in us. We are defined by the return on investment we create for ourselves. I paused. And to those who thought I was a bad investment, look at the dividends now. I stepped back. The roar of the crowd was deafening. People were standing up. Hats were being thrown. Dean Sterling was clapping the hardest of all. I walked off that stage not as Evelyn the scapegoat, not as Evelyn the afterthought, but as Evelyn the undeniable. The aftermath was chaotic. As the ceremony ended, I tried to make my way to the faculty reception, but I was intercepted near the exit gates. "Evelyn." It was Lloyd. He was pushing through the crowd with Bernice and Charlene trailing behind him. They looked out of place, sweaty and frantic. "Evelyn, wait!" Bernice called out, putting on a smile that didn't reach her panicked eyes. "Oh my God, honey, we had no idea valedictorian Harvard." She tried to hug me. I took a step back. "Don't," I said. "Now, Evelyn, don't be like that," Lloyd said, panting. "That was quite a speech. A bit dramatic, airing dirty laundry like that, but we're so proud. Harvard. Do you know what this means for the family? We can tell everyone at the club." "And the fellowship?" Charlene added, her eyes gleaming. "Does that mean you get a stipend? Because like Mom said, Chad and I are really in a tight spot, and since you're going to be rich—" I stared at them. I looked at Charlene, who saw me only as a wallet. I looked at Bernice, who saw me only as a trophy to brag about. I looked at Lloyd, who saw me only as an asset he could now manage. "There is no family," I said quietly. "What?" Bernice laughed nervously. "Of course there is. We're your parents." "You were my parents until you sold my future for a wedding reception," I said. "You made an executive decision, Remember, you divested, you reallocated the funds. I am no longer part of your portfolio. Evelyn, be reasonable. Lloyd snapped, his face turning red. We raised you. And I paid you back, I said. By leaving. By not asking you for a dime for 4 years. We are even, and as of this moment we are strangers. You can't do this, Bernice shrieked, drawing stares from passers-by. You owe us. We are your mother and father. Dean Sterling appeared at my elbow, flanked by 2 campus security guards. She didn't look at my parents. She looked at me. Is everything all right, Evelyn? The reception is starting. Everything is perfect, Virginia, I said, using her first name for the first time. I turned my back on them. I heard Bernice screaming my name. I heard Lloyd blustering about ingratitude. I heard Charlene crying. But their voices sounded like they were underwater, distant and distorted. I walked away with the woman who had actually saved me toward a future they couldn't touch. I never spoke to them again. I heard through the grapevine years later that Charlene divorced Chad and moved back into my old room, and that Lloyd went bankrupt trying to maintain appearances. But I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing. I had built a new life, a new family, and a new fortune. And this time, nobody was ever going to take it away from me. So let me ask you this. If you were in my shoes, would you have helped them when they came begging, or is there a limit to what family really means? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever had to cut ties to save yourself, I want to hear your story. My name is Evelyn Rose Miller, and thank you for listening.